All right. Hey everybody, we are live here with my man Dayday Kay from Racquet Flex. One of the best, well put together videos.
Oh,
Always really enjoy. Like it's just awesome. So it's really a pleasure to have Dayday on here, and we're going to be talking, well, mainly Dayday, well, about how to play in matches like you do in practice. So really excited about it, Dayday. So first off, thank you so much for coming on.
of course. Thanks for having me. As always, I'm flattered, and yeah, hello everybody. Let me know where you're calling or where you're visiting from, what countries you might be in. I'm always curious.
Yeah, definitely. Let us know where you're at. Maybe there'll be some in Cali near you. Um,
Possibly.
yeah,
Yeah.
yes. So I guess do you want to give us maybe like an overview of like what we're gonna accomplish today in the session, and then we can kick it off.
Yeah, definitely. So this year I was really brainstorming a lot of different topics that we could cover. And with our clinics, with our coaching, we just kept getting one question popping up just over and over and over again. Now, one question was, data. We keep working in these concepts, a lot of these techniques. And when I'm with you, like in person, I hit these shots that I've never seen before. But then as soon as I get into a match play situation or something where there's more pressure, my techniques crumble. And
Yeah.
I'm sure this is a universal feeling. I'm definitely a part of that club. And when we start getting into the neuroscience of things and how technique development works in the first place, it actually starts to make sense why we perform in like two different players when it comes to practice and matches. So that's one of the big things that I wanted to help players out with today.
Awesome. That's really exciting, and I can just echo Day Day that like one of the biggest questions or problems is like I play great in
Mhm.
practice and matches. I just like I choke or whatever. Or, my technique breaks down, etc. So this is going to be a very valuable session.
Exactly.
So yeah,
Exactly.
100%.
Cool.
So
Cool.
yeah, awesome. So I guess yeah, the first topic I think we'd want to cover that you presented to me
Mhm.
before is the science of habit change. So I was wondering if you could tell me about that.
Yeah. I mean, before I get into the science of it,
Sure. Hmm.
first of all, have you, Mirbam, personally, have you had a time like where you're in a match and your shots are feeling on, right? And then suddenly after one serve, let's say you miss one serve, and then all of a sudden these thoughts start creeping in of like, don't miss,
Oh
or
yeah.
you start getting a little bit tight, and then what happens? You immediately revert back to that old technique that you tried to get rid of like 4 or 5 years ago, and it just ever so slightly creeps back in,
Oh
right?
yeah.
This is one of those things where it's always tricky. It's like the mind is always trying to play tricks on us. So for me personally, when I was growing up playing as a junior, I had a lot of bad habits that I had to end up fixing later on in my tennis journey. But what I would notice is all of these little tweaks that I made, um, even after I've continued working on them thousands of times, they still keep creeping back in. So a lot of this, what we realize, has to do with habit development in the first place. So when we do anything, when we, drive back out of our driveway or hit a forehand or do a dance routine or even cook eggs, whatever it is, we have specific neurons. Think of them like roadways in the brain, right? That fire. And when those are executed time and time again, those actually cluster together and they become stronger. So this is widely talked about already about habit development, how it's really tough to break an old habit because you really never get rid of it, but
Hmm.
you can only override it. So that's one of the things that we as coaches do a lot is try to help players develop cues and drills that help them override their old bad habits that come up
Mm.
again and again. So let's take the serve for example. One of the most common problems I see is the grip, just starting out, right? So a lot of players they try, when they're getting started, they use the Eastern forehand grip and they do the very infamous pancake serve, right? Where their
Hmm.
strings go directly behind the ball and go straight through. And when I'm on the court with these players and I tell them, you've got to change to a continental grip for the first time. It's so foreign. Like they're just in wonderland. Like, how do I actually hit a shot using this weird grip? And it's kind of like riding a bike. You stumble and you feel really uncomfortable in the beginning, but then eventually your brain like starts to click, it starts to figure it out, and your brain kind of figures out what motions and what muscles to actually activate. So for example, on the serve, if we're used to hitting straight behind the ball, we might be using the forward bending of the wrist flexion. We might be extending the arm through. And instead, if we switch to more of the continental grip, we can use a brand new muscle like shoulder rotation and forearm pronation to actually start driving the racket head forward. So that's just one example of, one slight tweak in your grip making a huge ripple effect, a whole change in the rest of your swing. So then it starts to make sense that as soon as we go into a match, we toss the ball up and we might have the continental grip in the beginning, but as soon as it goes up there, we switch into the flat grip and then we revert back to our old technique, right? And this is exactly what, I just end up seeing time and time again. When I see my juniors on the practice court, they beat me like 6-1, 6-1, right? And then the second I see them playing these matches, it's like watching a totally different player.
Mm.
One of the big things that, if you're playing and you're playing a lot of matches, one of the big things to actively focus on is transferring some of the things that you do from the practice court into your matches because it doesn't happen automatically. There are actually steps and routines to actually help you to bridge that gap. If that makes sense. And that's what we'll cover in a little bit.
Yeah, that's exciting. And I think if they didn't name it something so tasty, Day like pancakes,
I know, then it wouldn't
maybe
be so appealing. I
broccoli or
don't know who
something, they'd be
came up
like,
with it.
nah.
Exactly. I
Oh
mean, I
man.
had it for years as a kid, and I could smash the ball like all day, but it was very inconsistent. And eventually, here's another thing. Some of my bad techniques they ended up leading me to injury, and
Mm,
this
yeah.
is one of the most dangerous things in tennis. It's not just performing a harmful technique; it's habituating a bad technique, which means if you reinforce a technique that's harmful over and over again, all you have to do is just turn your brain off, you go on autopilot. Let's say you're in a match, and again, snap your elbow. Now you have tennis elbow, or you took a
Mm,
weird step, and now you need a hip replacement. So a lot of these very avoidable problems um, come about when we, you know, again, are not really conscious of the way we're hitting the shot. And even if we get away with it the first time or the second time, if we're hitting hundreds and hundreds of shots each day, we have to know we're actually reinforcing the technique, whether it's good or bad each time. So that's just all the more reason to actually practice it the right way the first time so that you don't have to go and then rewire old techniques and try to fix bad habits that you could have just avoided in the first place.
yeah, 100%. We got a couple questions. Would you
Oh, of
prefer to
course.
hold? Oh, to take. Okay,
Um,
sure.
yeah, yeah, anytime, anytime.
Oh, okay. Thanks. Yeah, just let me know if in case you want to tackle it later. But
Mhm.
Jay says hello from Houston. Nice. Would it be great to hear any advice on how to
Mm,
accelerate on second serve under pressure?
this is
Mm,
actually a perfect segue because
nice.
our next course is actually on the kick serve. So we've been doing tons of research, a lot of reflection on our kick serve training. And I'll talk about the mindset first. This is one of the bigger things. When it comes to the second serve, especially in matches, this is where we have the most pressure, or we're faced with the most pressure because usually we're fighting our own thoughts. It's basically don't miss, don't fucking stop, right? And then at the same time, uh, if we listen to those thoughts, we end up getting tight. And because of that, we either are more inconsistent or we end up floating the ball in so that it's much safer. And then once your opponents pick up on that like you crumble under pressure or you don't have a
Yeah.
reliable second serve, then they step in on the ball, they start attacking it, just grilling your weakness. And now your confidence just spirals. So this is one of those things where first things first, like I said, um, training in the kick serve so that you, if you've done it enough times and if you've practiced enough times, the right techniques, you have to get it to a point where, again, even without thinking about the technique, you're executing everything like clockwork. Does that make sense? So
Mm-hmm.
if
Mm-hmm.
if you practiced again and again, let's say your backswing, and then the second you go into a match and you revert back to the old technique, it just means that you haven't bridged that gap completely,
Right.
right? And that doesn't necessarily mean that you just need to keep repping it in thousands more times, right? This just means that you haven't bridged that gap well enough. Um, so that said, going back to the second serve, um, one of the big things, this is to do with spin generation in general. When you're trying to get the ball in, the last thing you want to do is actually slow down the racket head, right? Slowing down the racket head actually means that you have to muscle the ball more, meaning you have to put more muscles into the shot, you have to control the shot more, and there's actually a higher likelihood of missing, right? If you've played the best tennis of your life, you'll know what I mean. You're playing free, you're playing relaxed and loose, right? That's what every player tries to strive for, is playing loose and effortless. And what a lot of players miss is when the ball starts flying out, it usually has to do with a lack of coordination or a lack of spin, right? So your
Mm.
contact point isn't right, or you're not generating enough spin in the right direction so that the ball actually dips down. Same thing with ground strokes when you're hitting approach shots. A lot of balls that go long, you end up slowing down the swing, and then you're sitting duck at the net because the approach wasn't good enough.
Mm.
So a big thing to think about is just apply more spin, so more up the back of the ball. Just change the direction of the racketed speed so you're going up the back, and the ball will start dipping in without losing any racketed speed. And then pay real close attention to the contact point as well. Um, every shot you should really have that dialed in where this position, this position feels comfortable, meaning I can do this hundreds of times and I'm not going to get tired and I'm definitely not going to get injured. And that's a really big priority.
Yeah, I like that, and yeah, just I appreciate you highlighting how much the serve is mental because I had this issue with my
Mhm.
second serve of like trying to get it in,
Right,
and then I would be
right.
having like kind of like a half pancake situation, and then
Yep.
I started getting lessons again, and my coach said, "Hey, like you have to remember that to just really go for it. Don't change your swing speed or anything like from
Yeah,
your first serve, and otherwise, like it's going to be even worse, because you'll slow down your swing and
exactly.
then you'll hit in the net." So I started just saying like right before I stepped to the line for my second serve, I was like telling myself,
Mhm.
go for it," and then it's my second
Yeah,
serve has improved so much. So
precisely. Precisely.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So great.
It's this desire to flinch, to tense up when when we need to protect ourselves or we feel unsafe, right? And in a
Yeah.
match, when our heart rate goes up and we're like, don't miss, there's a lot of tension, and that tension spreads into the body. So that's why we do a lot of working on breath and mindfulness and just knowing how to reset, especially in those critical moments.
Yeah, 100%. Let's see. You got Puffin. Thanks for bringing the summit together from Brighton.
UK.
Nice,
Wow,
nice,
nice.
nice, mate. Yeah, very good. Good knowledge. And then I'll just take one more data and then we can keep going.
Sure.
Cool. From Bonzel Pepperful. Nice one. I have the same hesitation and confidence problem with my one-handed backhand in matches. Any suggestions on swinging with more confidence in match play?
Mm, yep. This is another concept. So anytime we're talking about these shots, especially in matches, right? It could be either your strength and you're just not feeling that day, or it's an actual weakness of yours, you haven't worked on it yet, and players pick up on it and they start attacking it, right? Whatever it is, there's this little inkling of a thought that goes on in our mind during matches, which is usually stemmed from fear, right? It's, I don't want to lose. I'm going to feel really bad when I lose. And because of that, I'm going to do everything in my power to prevent it from happening. As you can see, a lot of this ties into mindset and psychology, not just technique development. We could do anything we want in our practice matches, but if we can't control our thoughts and the way our mind works and really learn how it works in these high pressure situations, then we're not going to have control over our actions or what our muscles do either by the time we get into a match.
Yeah.
So we have to work on these both at the same time. In terms of the one-handed backhand, I'm just going to say, just like on the kick serve, um, it's actually a little bit more difficult to do on the backhand because you have to use external shoulder rotation to generate spin. But that's usually a big driving factor that allows the ball to dip back into the court without having to slow down the swing. The one-handed backhand is inherently trickier to time because the contact's more in front of you, and we only have this one arm to use, compared to the two-hander, which is more to the side, giving you a little bit extra time, and you have both hands for control. That's why a lot of the modern players, you'll see barely miss their two-handers, especially the greatest players. That said, the one-hander, it's one of those go big or go home kind of shots where you need to have the timing right, you need to have a loose enough swing, and you need to be able to know how to generate spin using shoulder rotation on your one-hander. But going back to the mindset, again, you have to know again how your brain works and know exactly how to give yourself that mental reset. Some people, they it helps them to do a big exhale just right before a critical point, just to reset their mind. Other players, they go to their safe space where, in their heads, they close their eyes and they feel like they're completely at peace. They're very safe. So there's a lot of different techniques that we can use, but the number one goal is actually just to reset the mind and not let it sway too much from the emotions that come up during your matches.
Yeah, thanks, Dayday. Just very wise
Sure.
words there. And yeah, appreciate you taking the questions. And I guess we can, get back to,
Yeah.
more of what
Yeah.
content you want to
And
you
we'll
present.
keep sprinkling them in throughout. So keep the
Yeah,
questions coming. Really high
yeah,
quality
sure.
questions.
Awesome. Yeah. So, yeah, Dayday. Yeah, I guess we can continue. I think
Mhm.
I just want to make sure that before going to progressive overload, if there was anything else you wanted to mention about the habit change.
No, that's about it. So yeah,
Okay.
we'll start talking more about the actual nitty gritty, how to actually turn these into habits that we can repeat over and over again.
Perfect. Perfect. Yeah, that sounds
Awesome.
great. So, yeah, yeah. I mean, yeah, exactly. I mean, how can we do that? Are there specific,
Hmm.
maybe drills that we can do, or on
Yeah.
whether on court or off court, things like that, shadow swings.
So what I want to give players today is almost like the golden rules of training. These are principles to follow, and I'll give examples for different shots. So let's say the serve, the volleys, whatever it may be that players are struggling with, there's a way to actually help reinforce these techniques so that, again, when you're under pressure, you can perform them again and again. One of the most powerful concepts starting out that we talk about is progressive overload. This is used in pretty much all sports, especially on a competitive level. The concept is basically you practice something just to the point where it's too difficult to do. So it's not super easy, right? But it's not impossible. So you want to find something that's just you'll feel it's almost uncomfortable. So again, for example, a big thing I work on with players is the forehand, right? And specifically getting used to this relaxation, this flip on the forehand. um, and for a lot of players in the beginning, when they're used to going straight back and hitting through the ball in a very safe manner, it's a very foreign feeling to allow yourself to actually trust in your bigger muscles,
Mm,
relaxing your arm, and actually still hitting the ball with a lot of power. Because you think, I need to use all my muscles to generate power, but that's not necessarily how it works. Sometimes less is more. So this is a let's say if you've never heard this before, this is a completely new concept. So what do you do? The last thing you want to do is, start going into a match thinking of these new techniques. Let's say, because this is what typically happens. A player will watch a YouTube video of a slow-mo of Djokovic hitting a backhand. And then they go into their weekend match and they go, you know what my goal is? I'm gonna hit a Djokovic backhand today. And then what happens? right? It's worse than their regular backhand. And I had the same thing. I was like going family bowling one day, and
Nice.
on the way there I was watching like the best players in the world bowl so I can take away like a thing or two. And then I go and literally my 8-year-old sister at the time was beating me because I just ended up picking up concepts that I thought I saw but weren't actually happening in the first place. Right? So the very first thing to develop for players is not like the pro stroke, what the pro stroke looks like. It's almost completely different. What we try to do is we try to unravel each stroke so that we understand what the fundamental swing is, right? So a big concept that we talk about on both the forehand and the serve, I'll actually demonstrate here, is the figure eight. So right here, one of the big drills that we focus on the forehand is again relaxation and using the body rotation to generate this racket flip and then coming back into the shot with internal shoulder rotation and pronation. But without developing this initial swing to begin with, a lot of players, when they try to execute the flip, they'll do it actively, right? So they'll flip the racket back and then they still have that tension in their swing. And those are two totally different forehands, even though on the surface, when you look at a pro do it, it may look the same. So to break this down, one of the first things that I recommend doing is isolation training. So what isolation training means is we take apart all 20 motions, movements that are going on in these strokes. So let's say for the serve, we have the toss, we have the backswing, we have the lower body load, we have the upper body coil. We strip everything away and just focus on one thing. So let's say a lot of players have problems with the toss, right? So that means you're just for a 15, 30-minute practice session, all you're working on is the toss, right? Or let's say you're working on activating your back leg and hip, then all you're focused on is drills to help this. Because the brain, it's very easily overloaded, right? Our brains are not built to multitask and focus on 20 different stuff at the same time. We're very good at focusing on one specific thing, right? So if we want to work with our brain, not against our brain, the best things that you can do is give it work that's within its capacity. So have it train one specific part of a stroke over and over and over again, right? Because when you go to, let's say, your local club and you start and you take a lesson, what'll typically happen, right? Assuming you actually work on serves in the first place, at the very last 15 minutes, this is what I hear all the time. They're doing the entire serve, and then the coach is just looking behind them, just nodding their head, like, oh, toss to the left, toss to the right, and they're doing the full serve every single time. But if you're trying to fix a bad habit, it's just too much for the brain to work with to have to coordinate all of these things at the same time, right? So let's say you have a plethora of problems on your strokes, whatever it may be. um, you want to work on one at a time at first, right? And that's what we have in our courses and in our clinics. We have these drills that basically take every other part of the stroke away and just focus on that one thing so that your brain can excel at that until it becomes second nature, until it becomes autopilot and you don't have to focus on it. Then from there, we talk more about bringing everything together, right? So this is after you've done the isolated practice. You want to incorporate relaxation, right? So um, one of the big problems that I see with players is when they do shadow swings versus when they actually go to hit a ball. There's, believe it or not, there's actually two different neural pathways being fired when they're practicing without the ball versus with the ball. So it's no shocker that, you know, players all the time they say that I can shadow swing like Federer himself, but then as soon as that ball comes, I look like I don't know how to hold a racket. So this is usually why we haven't bridged the gap between how your brain works when you're just focused on the swing versus when you're focused on oh crap, a ball is coming. Like we're like a dog. You see a ball and we just immediately revert and our brain forgets what reality was. So this is where we start tying together relaxation. And even when we see a ball coming in, we don't get too excited, right? We still remember what we're focused on. So this really comes down to slow, precise shadow swings that initially help to ingrain muscle memory. The goal of these relaxed shadow swings, so let's say on the serve, um, this is the equivalent of the figure eight on the forehand. But if you follow with me, if you have a racket, you can actually try this as well. And we talk about this on day one of our 5 day serve challenge, which is completely free. If you want to, start using some of these drills yourself. But I'll cover the first one here today. So we have just take your arm in a windmill, just like this, right? Relaxing your arm, right? Straight in a circle. And then on the third swing, you're just gonna let the racket drop straight behind you, like this. So one, two, three. One, two, three. And you're just trying to feel again the natural momentum um, based on using these bigger muscles, the natural momentum of where your racket wants to go, right? This right here. Once you drop and you start externally rotating the shoulder, this is already way different from what I see a lot of players do, which is toss and that racket swings back, and then it's very tip heavy, right? They hit with the wrist, they flick the arm. This is again much tenser. So keeping it relaxed, dare I say, holding it with less fingers, just so that you can have even more relaxation, right? The goal is to ironically not be in control of every movement the racket does, right? Letting it lag behind, letting it follow where our body goes. So once you get used to letting the racket drop behind, I want you, as soon as you feel the racket drop, to rotate the hip and the torso ever so slightly in, which you'll notice the racket actually starts to swing into the right edge. Then eventually we work this into the serve where we start looping, toss the ball, and still do the same flip, and then begin rotating back into contact as you're hitting the shot. Now, this is just one example of, again, using relaxation and doing these shadow swings to build in comfort. That said, when we talk about the mental side of things, one thing I see a lot of players getting when it comes to their training is they're not just working on their body, but they're also working on their mind, right? So there's this mind muscle connection where you're doing the swing, but if you're not actually focused on the specific technique that you're trying to correct, then it's very easy to revert back to the old technique. The mindless shadow swings is basically useless. And with our limited time that we have nowadays, you want to make the most of your training. So almost treat every single practice, every single shadow swing like a meditation practice. And you're actually focused on like almost like being inside the muscle, like Schwarzenegger would say, and
Yeah.
feeling what muscles are being activated when you're doing this swing and how it feels when you eventually hit the shot as well. And that's what's worked time and time again for a lot of my best students because again, they're not just mindlessly practicing this or working against the ball machine and focusing on if the ball's going in or not. They're all here, right? All their attention is on the specific movement that they're trying to get used to and reinforce. So that's
Awesome.
again isolated drills and relaxed shadow swings. Then we get into slow fed ball rallies and more simulated practice, right? And you can see we still haven't even entered match play situation. Now, before I get into that, I'll just pause right quick if you or anybody has any questions in the chat.
Yeah, there's some questions. Appreciate it.
Sure,
Yeah. So Artie says learning a lot as always. Thanks.
awesome.
Glad you're enjoying. Let's see what else. We have a question, or I should switch to two-hander. Got it. um, I don't
Funny enough,
know.
that's what we did, but I don't recommend it for everybody.
Yeah, it's a tough
It is it
switch.
is a tough change. Yeah.
Yeah. Sat. So Rainer from Munich, Germany. Hello.
Mm.
Go Bayern Munich because Harry Kane. I'm a fan of him
Oh,
from
nice.
Spurs. But yeah, so
Welcome,
soccer.
welcome.
Yeah, yeah.
Nice.
So thanks for the summit. Great session. When you speak about mindfulness, how do you include that into your training?
Mm. That's a really good question. So I know it sounds really airy-fairy when you talk about mindfulness in tennis, right? Because it's like, oh, let's just kumbaya and close our eyes. Again, it it really does come down to focus, right? So, um, I'll give a real life example instead of just talking theory. So recently, one of my juniors, we were working on the forehand, right? And we were working in getting used to a new contact point because he had a problem with over rotation, right? And because of this over rotation, he wasn't using a lot of this forward pulling from the arm right here going into contact. Instead, he was relying on his body rotation, like so, and he wasn't using the right counterbalancing moves to actually help him to decelerate his arm at contact. But all that said, he had a technique that he had to fix. And what we ended up doing, we actually focused on, again, we had a resistance band and we just focused on getting used to this initial motion of horizontal shoulder adduction. So imagine you're doing the chest fly right here. And again, the difference between using mindfulness and not using mindfulness in your training is very subtle. It's almost unnoticeable, right? If I was not mindful, if I was just, again, doing random shadow swings, I would be just doing this a bunch of times and I'd be like, what am I having for breakfast tomorrow? Oh, yeah, I forgot my taxes. And then, an example of mindful training would be, okay, so while I'm doing this movement, I'm visualizing how this would apply into the shot, right? So when I'm in the backswing, as I begin rotating, I'll also start pulling this arm forward into contact, right? So it's really where your mind is when it comes to your training. And then when you get into your matches as well, it's being able to close your eyes and go back to that moment so that you can actually see yourself doing it even when the pressure is on. That said, I do have more mindfulness techniques that we talk about later on as we get into how to actually deal with match pressure in the first place.
Awesome, awesome.
There's,
Thanks, Diddy.
yeah.
Yeah, got some more follow up. I actually like to practice with the wall because it gives me lots of
Mhm.
repetitions and it becomes kind of meditative.
That's great. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
a really good example. I mean, it's just you, yourself out there without a other person on the other side of the court. You don't really have to focus on like trying to get the ball in because that's one thing I find myself doing. Even if I'm practicing, I want to give the other guy a good practice. So if you have a ball machine or if you're practicing against the wall, you can mess up however many times you want to, and you have that freedom to experiment and do new stuff, which then again allows you to focus more on what's going on here, not on the other side of the court. Right.
Yeah. Yeah, awesome, awesome. Thanks, Diddy. And then Snowy
Mhm.
says for isolation training, how do you decide which part to work on first? At what point is the
Mm.
player ready to move on to the next part?
That is definitely a loaded question. Just because, for every single player is going to have a whole set of different issues in their strokes. I do see a lot of commonalities, so I could talk about the common points. So, um, let's assume because you didn't mention what specific stroke you're talking about, but let's assume it's
Mhm.
the serve, which is probably the most complex. So then you can carry that into the other strokes. Um, I would start with the contact point, right? So the arm position, the torso position, and the stance and the grip when it comes to dialing in the fundamentals of every single shot. So when I say isolation training, I don't just mean isolating one segment of your muscles. I mean isolating one specific part of the shot, right? So you work in just the contact, and then you work in just the contact and the extension. Then you work in a little bit more of the acceleration, right? Then you work in the backswing last. That's generally what I recommend for all of your shots because, again, contact point is the main thing, right? When the racket hits the ball, that's what actually affects the ball. everything else is window dressing. From there, the things that help the contact point are the acceleration and then eventually the backswing as well, which has a lot of, stylistic differences. But that said, um, depending on what shot you're focused on, sometimes you might be more developed in one part of your stroke. Let's say you have really good footwork, so you don't need to work on that as much. And instead, again, you're not turning away enough, or your head is moving through your shot. Whatever it is, that's usually what I would recommend. And obviously, part of the diagnosis when I work with people is helping players prioritize what to work on first. But generally, it's contact point, then acceleration, then the backswing slash leg drive and launch, and other stuff like that.
Awesome. That's super helpful. Thanks,
Sure.
City. So, and then Christopher just kind of confirms what you said earlier. Once the ball is introduced, everything changes. This holds true for all strokes. So,
It's actually
yeah.
I'm glad mention this again. So the the actual biggest difference when it comes to whether a ball is coming or not is what we're paying attention to, right? So when a ball's coming, there's a whole set of problems that we have to work on, which is the ball is actually coming and we have to read where it's going to be. When we're shadow swinging, there is no success or failure, right? We can just do a motion, and if it feels right, if it feels loose, it's totally fine. But when a ball comes, immediately our brain goes into hit the ball mode. So when it comes to our goal oriented behavior, the goal changes from doing the swing properly to hitting the ball over the net and in. So that's why I remove the goal in a lot of our training with our players. When we're working in the technique, it takes away the attention from the most important part, which is the actual swing that affects the shot. I mean, I'm sure you as players relate to this, but as soon as the ball comes and we immediately forget about our technique, we're usually focused on trying to get the ball somewhere. So instead, uh, whether you hit the ball in or not should not be the goal anymore. And I'll get into this later, even when we talk about match play. The goal should be, did I execute the right motion that I was going for? Did I keep looseness in my swing? And was my contact point clean? Right? All of these things has to do with what's going on uh, in my body, in my muscles, and on my side of the court, right? If the attention is on the other side of the court, meaning, besides reading the oncoming ball, trying to get the ball somewhere, that's where our attention goes. And then again, we have no CPU left for
Mhm.
fixing our waiter's tray, right? That's exactly what ends up happening.
Yeah. Yeah, that's good stuff. And then Snowy asks, what are the figure eight relaxed swings for the one-handed backhand and volley, both sides?
Mm, that's a great question.
Mhm.
So before moving on, I'll just cover that real quick here. So the progression you can do, get into your backhand swing, and you just swing back and forth, just rock the arm just like this, right? And then ever so slowly start introducing body rotation like this, right? So the forehand was like this, right? Like so. And this simulates the backswing. This simulates the forward swing and the roll. Same thing with the backhand. This simulates the backswing and the slot, and this simulates the contact and the roll. So it would look just like this. And the volleys are a little bit more tricky. What I generally like to do is something like this, because this is working in, again, relaxation and keeping the hand moving forward through the shot and getting a nice cut on the ball. You're here, forehand, backhand, forehand, backhand. And you want to feel that slight release through all of your shots. Because again, we are training in looseness here.
Good stuff. Good stuff.
Awesome.
Let's see if we have anything else.
Sure.
Sat, I really love your approach, and I
Wonderful.
really
Wonderful.
love the fun that you're having in your videos.
Oh, all
Excellent.
the
Sounds
time.
like he's a
Yeah.
fan. Yeah, some good
Nice.
jokes.
Thanks for
Like the
watching.
little and the
Yeah,
little cuts and stuff.
corny joke or two. Yeah.
Good stuff.
Yeah,
Good
we have
stuff.
fun recording them.
Yeah,
Awesome.
definitely brilliant responses. Awesome. Yeah, so we can get back
Mhm.
to
Great.
it. Yeah.
Yeah. So we were talking about After the isolation drills and relaxed shadow swings, next we talk about the slow, emphasis on the slow, fed ball, and rallies. So, again, going back to the concept of progressive overload, we don't want to overwhelm ourselves with too much to work on at once, which means that we want to slow things down enough where A, we're not harming our bodies by doing it wrong, because that's usually going to happen. When we're working in a new technique, the chances of doing the technique wrong and getting into an uncomfortable position, let's say with your wrist and your elbow, is very high. The last thing you wanna do is swing as hard as you can the second you're feeling it even a little bit, right? You wanna start slow. The second reason you wanna do that is, again, mindfulness. So when we slow things down, we gain awareness over exactly what's going on. We can even see the swing, what's going on, right? So when we're actually, hitting a shot, this is probably the best example because 'cause we're not just talking about our attention, we're talking about our actual eyes. Where do our eyes typically go as soon as we hit the shot? Boom, right? We hit the shot before we even make contact. We're already looking at where the ball we're trying to get the ball. And that's a very common problem I see. But again, that signals where our attention is. It's on the other side of the court. So instead, keeping the eye fixated at and through the contact zone, right? That's before, at, and right after contact on all of your shots. Here, keeping the eyes right there is going to be a big part of it. So going back to slowness, the slow fed ball and rally ball drills. When it comes to rallying, as boring as it is, I would do a lot of stuff with a willing partner, a hitting partner, from the service line, right? And again, if you can't work it in from the service line, chances are you don't have the coordination in your contact and the ball control to be able to actually keep a rally going. So then a baseline is virtually impossible. So usually I recommend a lot of training from the service line and then work your way backwards to the baseline, right? Because as soon as you get to the baseline, this is even for your serve training. Work it in from the service line, then work your way backwards when you can
Yeah.
safely speed up the motion. And then again, pairing that with isolation drills as well. That you can do one specific drill, let's say going from the contact. If you're working in topspin for the first time, go to your contact, focus on using the shoulder rotation to create the windshield wiper action here, right? And if you can do this from the service line, go a little bit further backwards and do the same exact thing until you're at the baseline. And then you can add in the full swing and see, am I still applying this? Right? Without it, again, if you're going out, you're doing the full swing for the first time, what happens is the backswing, the slot, everything you're doing is
Mm,
already setting you up for failure, and you're not even going to be able to use shoulder rotation in the first place. So until we have that stuff dialed down, these extra bells and whistles are actually taking away from your stroke. They're not adding to it. So might as well eliminate it if you can.
yeah, that's really good, Day Day. I mean, I just yeah, I see a lot of players who like they're given like
Mhm.
a technical fix and then they immediately like use it in point play or in a match, which is even worse, and then they get
Right,
frustrated
right.
after
Over a
not
weekend.
executing. Yeah, and then they just go
Exactly.
back to like I can't do it.
Exactly.
So yeah,
It's almost like, you know, and I get to this analogy later as well, and I'll tie this all back. But
sure.
the analogy is when you're working on a new technique, it's very similar to like when a building goes under construction, right? So when a building's under construction or when a road is being constructed, you can't live in it. You can't live in the building. You can't drive on the road, right? It doesn't work. So this whole building phase, the goal is to make it better than it was before. But until it's better than it was before, without any cracks under pressure, right? Or until it's very stable, it's gonna crumble. It's gonna not work, especially when you have six or seven other stuff to focus on. Because when you're in a match, we're focused on keeping track of score. We're focused on managing our emotions. There's zero emotions when we're shadow swinging, right? There's no what if I lose when we're shadow swinging. So it's so easy to focus on our bodies. The second we're in a match, we have four or five other obligations that we have to attend to, which again take away the focus from the technique that we were trying to apply in the first place. That's why when you're in a match, and I'll get to this in a little bit too, you want to remove those obligations. You want to make it safe to fail.
Mm.
That said, the next thing after the slow fed ball and rally ball drills is a low pressure match. So this is actually not a tournament, right? Where people are watching, where you have an opponent, where you paid for it, right? This is typically you play against somebody that's at your level or a little bit worse than you actually. That's what I recommend to begin with. And I say that because when you're playing somebody better than you, your that desire to win and the quality of the shots that are coming at you is actually harder to deal with. So let's say you've been working in your forehand over and over and over again. A really good player is going to start hitting shots where you're seeing every ball up here. So now you weren't prepared for that in your practice, and now you revert back to the old technique. So play somebody who you can normally comfortably beat, let's say, right? And don't tell them, right? They'll say, "Hey, I wanted to hit with you because I think you're a very easy practice, and I want to experiment." I'll say that to Daytree sometimes, but
Oh
unless you're really
wow.
close.
Brotherly love, yeah, I hear you.
Yeah, brotherly love. But when you're in these match play situations, remind yourself that the goal isn't to actually win, but it's to create a control environment where now you're you're in the context of an actual match and you're keeping track of points, but you're seeing, can I still execute this technique, right? So let's say for example, if I'm working on my toss, right, for my serve, and I practice it for 2, 3 weeks, right? After that, I start getting it down to the point where I can do it with the rest of the serve motion, not in a match. Then the second I get into a match, I'll go for, let's say, a serve and volley. But within that whole serve and volley sequence, we have toss the ball, load, launch, swing, contact, step forward, move into the volley, hit open court, winner, net. We have like a whole protocol of like 30 stuff that we have to do. That said, the success or failure of that entire sequence has to do with, did I toss the ball right? So you could miss the volley, right? You could trip over yourself and fall, and that's okay. All of it's okay. Did I toss the ball right? As long as that was your goal. So that's going to be a really big thing to focus on for a lot of players, is finding out what's your number one weakness, right? So your biggest weakness in your game, right? And that specific aspect of your stroke, within that stroke, what's the biggest technique that's holding you back from getting the results that you need? And then drill that in just like I'm talking about. That's what I would recommend for every player. And then lastly, once you get used to these low pressure matches and you're comfortably executing it at least, let's say, 2/3 of the time,
Mm.
right? Then you can actually simulate real competitive practice. So you up the intensity, you start playing higher level players, you go into a match, still not expecting to win, but again, for purely having the goal of executing that once foreign technique and being able to still apply it in real life matches, right? If you're practicing with a friend, you can, I don't know, add a little bit of pressure. So loser
Mhm.
pays for lunch, or
Right.
loser does 100 push-ups, right? Something like that, where you activate that part of your brain that goes, well, it would suck to lose, but you're still willing to lose, right? Because again, success or failure comes down to, did I execute the new technique or not? Not did I win or not? Not even did I hit the ball over or not, right? It's, did I execute the new technique?
Yeah, 100%. And then so I guess,
Mhm,
say you progress, to the high pressure match, which is great. You've gotten
mhm,
there, but then let's say you have a couple matches in a row where, I wasn't able to execute this, maybe I only
mhm,
did like one third of the time, or I've had this experience before where I thought I was ready, with my serve change. Then I got
mhm.
into a match and like first set, great. And then second set, like it got to like 4-all, and all of a sudden, oh,
Right.
going back,
Yeah.
so like it, then do you just go back one level and then practice more on that
Yeah. I'm
technique?
glad you mentioned that.
Mm.
So this is very common, first of all, where
Mhm.
you might start off strong in a set, right? And then these old habits kick in. And that's usually
Yeah.
because we don't have an anchor to go back to, right? So
Mm.
if we've applied it, if we've started to get used to a new technique, um, we're using, let's say, rote memory, right? We're using the forefront of our brain. We're really thinking hard about doing the motion, and only when we use that part of our brain do we do it. As soon as that turns off, we're back to the, old technique. It's like Jekyll and Hyde. So being able to condense these new techniques into cues and reminders when you're in these higher pressure situations is huge. This goes all the way to the pro level. So, um, we had the chance to see a lot of, pro matches up close, and we've seen, let's say, when Halep and Mortuglo were working together. I was sitting right behind Mortuglo and seeing some of the cues that he was giving to Halep and during the practice, right? And I thought it would be like very nuanced, very advanced technical stuff, and it was literally just this, right? Which signaled, yeah, arc the ball higher, right? More
Ah,
height on the ball.
yeah.
And it's like that's one of those things where they probably discussed it before the match. And then
Mm.
as soon as it was a high pressure situation, we're talking about the best of the best here. They still forget to go back to basics. They still need a coach to reference that, right?
Yeah.
And then they go, ah, right. And then they apply it again. She ended up winning that match, by the way. She was like down 2-4. Um, and the cues are basically these little reminders of what technique resonated with us the most. So let me give you an example. Going back to the serve toss, one of the most helpful cues for players who flick the arm up or they lead with the arm like this, and it's very tense and very rigid. Smoothing out the toss, you can relax the toss arm and lead with the tossing elbow. So imagine there's
Mm.
a string on your elbow, and that's the thing that's leading your arm all the way up. Right now, your arm is straight and relaxed. Right, if you're leading with your hand, your arm bends in like this.
Yeah.
But if you lead with the elbow like this, it goes all the way up. If you're leading with your shoulder, your body tilts back and you lose balance. So the elbow straight up. Now, how would that work in a cue? Because right now you have that new technique, that aha moment, right? That new feeling. But again, it doesn't transfer well into a match where you have to focus on 20 different stuff. So a cue in this case could be lead with the elbow, right? Just a simple phrase attached to a relatively complex motion. And you can do this with anything. So, um, for example, off arm pull, right? Off arm across. That helps coil the body away. So you get like 5 different actions done with just one cue. And being able to condense all these very complex motions into one cue so that you can fall back to it in your matches is very critical. Maybe one day you get to a point where these techniques are so ingrained that you don't even need a cue to actually reference to these techniques. But until then, which could take years, you're gonna need cues. And everybody has different cues that they respond to the most, depending on whether you're a kinesthetic or a visual learner, what specific muscle movement called out to you the most. Whatever it is, once you find that, you can continually reference that over and over and over again because your brain already knows, okay, if I say lead with the elbow, I mean do this, right? If I'm in a match and I immediately revert to this, saying leading with the elbow helps me to reinforce that new motion. You can always
Yeah.
fall back to it.
Yeah, those cues are huge. I mean, I was thinking about my serve. Like, I think so with my pinpoint stance for a while, I was like
Mm,
stepping with my back foot a little bit too far to the side. So my
right,
cue was
right.
step on the inside of my left foot, and like just thinking about that. That was my cue all the
Yeah,
time, and it really helped so much to
exactly.
get that done with. Yeah,
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 yeah.
yeah.
Another, and I'm gonna probably wrap things up soon with this
True,
concept.
true. Yeah.
Visualization. That's huge as well. The tying cues with visualization is really big. Some of the best players, right before hitting their swings, they actually visualize the actual shot they're trying to execute before actually doing it, right? So if I'm if I see a short ball, somebody sliced it, and I'm coming in for an approach hop, I'll actually picture myself hitting the hop and getting the ball to loop in the direction I'm trying to go right before I'm actually doing it, so that I'm not seeing this happen for the first time when I actually do it. So that visualization can be very useful. This is what one of the big reasons why I recommend recording yourself,
Hmm.
um, even when you're doing the technique correctly. A lot of coaches recommend, and this is really good advice, to record players when they're doing the wrong motion, because it helps them gain body awareness and help actually realize what the problems they have, and then they can go and fix them. But even once they fix the problem, I would recommend recording yourself so that you can actually see like a third person perspective of yourself, almost, of what it looks like when you're doing the technique properly, and then allow that to flash across your mind right before you execute that motion, or right before you're playing that point in the match.
Yeah, visualization is huge there. Dede, I know we've hit the hour mark, so
Oh, of
I
course,
know you
yeah.
probably have stuff
Time
to do.
slips by like that. I
Yeah,
know.
it's crazy. It's crazy. But uh, it- should I wrap up with this question, or want to just do the outro? Because
Oh
I
yeah,
know you might
no,
have to
let's
leave
go
at
for it.
6.
Yeah, I have
Okay,
time for
okay, awesome.
questions, definitely.
Oh, okay, awesome. Thanks. So Sat asks, what kind of fitness and strength training do you consider most important? Oh, for tennis players, so different subject, I
Oh, for
guess.
tennis players. Okay.
Mm,
Yeah, that's an interesting one. First, there's different phases of training, depending on what specific aspect you need to focus on. They call this periodization training, where based on whether you're working on gaining muscle, gaining strength, gaining power, you work in across, let's say, half a year or a year, different aspects of your physicality. That said, for a lot of rec players, what I would recommend training in, what I see the most lacking, is power. So explosive power. So instead of doing a lot of reps in the gym, like 12, 13 reps, what I generally recommend, with a lot of rest in between, is plyometric space training. So a lot of explosive, especially footwork related stuff with the lower body. So that includes something as simple as this. So um, let's say, the wood chopper drill like this. You have a band here or a cable here. Instead of doing a bunch of reps like this, right? Again, doing it mindlessly and just going, all right,
mm.
uh, you know, the stamps are down. Instead, we're we're actually focused on engaging our core, going, this is the big thing, going into the concentric contraction phase, which is this phase where you're pulling forward uh, very fast. And then the eccentric, meaning you're lengthening, you're going back slow. So if I was doing cables, I would do about 5, 6 reps of fast forward and then slow backward. Fast forward, slow backward. For shoulder rotation, so we have the band here now. We're holding the band. Fast forward to do internal rotation, slow backwards.
Mm.
Fast forward, slow backwards. And use full range of motion as well. So that really does help to get used to to simulate the actual movements that we'll be doing in tennis. Because as you'll know, no matter what level it is, tennis is a relatively fast and explosive sport, right? It's a series of sprints with rests in between. It's not just a marathon. So that's why we do really want to simulate that if we are training in the gym, what we're actually doing on the tennis court.
Yeah, 100%. Great tips there. Appreciate it. And then Brian says, Day Day, I joined late and I'm catching up, but your suggestions on how to specifically practice to take it to court on game day are awesome. Thank you for the tips.
Thanks, Brian. Yeah, glad to help. Awesome. Awesome.
Sweet, Day Day. Well, I just obviously want to let everyone know like how they can check out all your awesome stuff. So, and we do have a
Hmm.
button right below this video as well for people to click. So just click
Absolutely.
there to check out their Day Day and Daytree's website. But like, where
Yes,
would
yeah.
you like people to check out,
Oh, I
see what
mean,
you're doing?
starting out, if you haven't already, just check out a bunch of our free YouTube videos online. We make a lot of videos there. We try to make them as high quality as possible.
Mm-hmm.
Talking about stuff that aren't really often covered, right? And on top of that, we do host clinics in all different cities. So we are actually heading to Europe this summer as well as around the States, Florida and California this year. So you could check out our website, go to our clinics page to see all of the popular clinics if you want some in-person training with us, or just join one of our either free or paid courses that we have also on our website. I did mention earlier our free 5-day serve challenge. So if a lot of the concepts resonated with you today, the practice, the matches, being able to apply them, take some of the drills that I talk about in the courses and go out to the court and apply that, even if it's 30 minutes, just again, using isolation and then practicing the relaxed shadow swings. And then slowly going into fed ball or rally drills, then low pressure matches, then high pressure matches. So applying these golden rules of training with some of the drills that we offer either in person or in our courses, guarantee you it's going to be a game changer. So go check it out.
Awesome, awesome. Thanks a lot, Daytree. Or I'm
Awesome.
sorry, Dayday. Oh gosh, sorry about that.
No, no, no,
And
no
then so
worries. I get it all the time.
Dayday.
Yeah. I
Oh
forget
man, yeah,
sometimes.
yeah. Oh man. So Dayday,
Yeah.
I guess to kind of wrap it up. Uh, like action steps are great for our audience.
Hmm.
So like, I guess after they watch this awesome session with you
Yeah.
educating us about this such an important concept, what's the very next step you would want players to take?
Yeah. I would say go check out our 5-day serve challenge and look through some of the training. If you do like what you see, if you like the way that we explain instructions, then that's very similar to how we do in the rest of our videos, the rest of our courses, and one of our clinics as well. So just either join that challenge, check out what we have to offer, and then if you're interested or if we're in a city that's near you, then schedule a call with us and we'll set something up.
Awesome, awesome. And where are y'all again?
Yeah.
City?
We're based out of Long Beach,
Long
Long
Beach.
Beach, but we're in Florida all the time. We're in Europe all the time. So yeah, we move around a lot.
Europe eating them croissants, huh?
Yes, yes, sir.
No, that's good. Sorry, I got bad jokes myself. Oh, oh,
Yeah.
Rebecca. Hey,
Oh,
Rebecca.
our
What's your
website.
website?
Yeah, it's racquetflex.com. So
Mhm.
our brand RACQUETFLEX.com. If you want to check out our clinics, it's rackflex.com/clinics.
Excellent, excellent. And you, sorry,
Mhm.
and I have included the button for Racquet
Yeah.
Flex's website right below this video. If you're on YouTube, you won't see it, but I'll add
Mhm.
it to the description, and I also just put it on the chat right now, so y'all can just click that.
Okay.
Yeah,
Perfect.
dope, awesome, awesome. Well, Day, I want to thank you so much again for your time. It's just great to see you,
Oh,
great vibes and
likewise.
great lessons.
Yeah.
So, yeah,
Always a pleasure,
hopefully.
Nirvan.
Thank
Yeah.
you very much. Yeah, so
Thanks for
definitely,
having me.
hopefully yeah, no, thank you for coming, and hopefully, in the future we can make some content,
Would love
even
to.
before the summit. That'd be great. So,
Yeah.
thank you so
Yeah.
much, and everybody check out Racquet Flex YouTube channel as well as the website, which I put in the chat and the button below the video. And yeah, thank you all
Amazing.
for attending, and
Yeah.
thank you,
Thanks everybody
Dede.
for watching. Yeah, definitely. And yeah,
Yeah,
like I always say, go out and train hard. We'll see you in the next video.
that's right. All right, peace.
Nice.
Thanks.
Awesome. Take care.